Jó estét kívánok!
Jó estét! Üdvözlünk mindenkit!
Üdvözlünk mindenkit a Közös Városunk konferencián. Egy technikai bejelentéssel kezdeném. A tolmácsgépek azoknak, akik angolul nem beszélnek, és ezért az angol szövegeket magyarul szeretnék hallani, azok az 1-es csatornát keressék a tolmácsgépen. Welcome to our Common City Conference, and I would like to start with a technical issue. If you need a translator machine, because we will speak in the beginning in Hungarian, you should look for channel 2, because this is for English. Tehát köszöntünk mindenkit a Közös Városunk konferencián, amit Udvarhelyi Tesszával, Balogh Samuval és Polyák Leventével készítettünk elő az elmúlt hónapokban, azon gondolkodva, hogy mi az, amit mi tehetnénk a saját városunkért, és erre kerestünk példákat, hogy mások mit tesznek érte.
Igen, mielőtt belekezdenénk abba, hogy mi fog történni pontosan itt ebben a 2, illetve 3 napban, néhány mondatban szeretném összefoglalni, hogy valójában miért szerveztük meg ezt a konferenciát, mi volt a fő indoka, hogy ez létrejöjjön. Az utóbbi hónapokban többen foglalkoztunk azzal, hogy ma Magyarországon, Budapesten milyen olyan civil mozgalmak vannak, amelyek a városhoz, a saját lakókörnyezetükhöz kapcsolódó ügyekben aktívak, és képesek lennének akár politikai szerepvállalásra is, hogy elérjék a céljaikat. És egy általános tapasztalatunk az, hogy bár nagyon sokan vannak, akik ma Magyarországon civil szférában városhoz kötődő ügyekkel foglalkoznak, egy hatalmas fal vagy árok húzódik az úgynevezett civil szféra és a politikai szféra között, miközben azt látjuk, hogy Európa más városaiban ennek van most már talán hagyománya is, de sikeres példák mindenképpen vannak. És ezért azt gondoltuk, hogy nagyon hasznos lenne, hogyha szerveznénk egy olyan konferenciát, ahova elhozzuk azokat a képviselőket, azokat az embereket, akik Európa más városaiban ezt már kipróbálták, és talán sikerre is vitték. Úgyhogy tulajdonképpen ez a fő cél ennek a konferenciának, hogy példákat hoztunk ide Budapestre, és ki tudja, reméljük, hogy valamilyen szempontból majd ez termékeny táptalajra le ez a példa, és előbb-utóbb beindul Budapesten, Magyarországon is egy ilyen folyamat.
Köszönjük, hogy ilyen sokan eljöttetek, több mint 100-an regisztráltak a különböző műhelyekre is, amik holnap lesznek, és lesz holnap egy kerekasztal beszélgetés magyar szereplőkkel is, tovább erősítve azt, hogy elkezdjünk gondolkozni, hogy hogyan lehet Magyarországon változtatni a településeink és akár Budapest életén. Én közösségszervezőként azt tapasztalom, hogy nagyon nehéz elindulni ezen az úton, nagyon nehéz az állampolgároknak felvállalni azt, hogy aktívan cselekedjenek saját magukért és közösségeikért. Ugyanakkor, amikor megteszik az első lépéseket, és sikerek érik őket, akkor fel tudnak bátorodni, és közéleti szerepet tudnak vállalni. Ebben szeretnénk őket bátorítani a jövőben. És most Samu egy kicsit a program keretét elmondja.
Így van, ugye egy 3 napos konferenciáról beszélünk. A mai nap 2 nemzetközi kerekasztal beszélgetés lesz. Ezek fognak itt rögtön elindulni, miután mi befejeztük ezt a kis rövidnyitó beszédet. Holnap egész nap műhelybeszélgetések lesznek, ezek napközben fognak menni. 2-2 párhuzamosan összesen 8 beszélgetés, és a nap pedig egy magyar, mint hogy azt Móni említette, egy magyar kerekasztal beszélgetéssel fog zárulni. Vasárnap pedig kora este 5:30-tól az Adát polgármesternek című filmet fogjuk vetíteni, amely azt dolgozza fel, hogy 2015-ben a Barcelona az hogyan vitte el sikerre azt a célt, hogy Ada Colau egykori lakhatási aktivistát választassa meg Barcelona polgármesteri pozíciójába.
És most az első beszélgetésen a téma, végülis ez lesz a Mozgalomból városba, városházára, várospolitikák Európában, aminek a moderátora Polyák Levente lesz, és a vendégek Florian Schmidt, Rui Franco, Laura Collini és David Bravo.
Jó, de Kelet-Európában ez lehetetlen. Ez a második beszélgetésnek a címe, amelyen Lenka Burgerova Prágából, Joanna Erbel Varsóból, Iva Ivsics és Hanna Jusics pedig Zágrából lesznek a vendégeink, és arról beszélgetnek, hogy valóban lehetetlen ez.
Köszönjük szépen, és akkor átadjuk a telepet Leventének és a vendégeknek.
Jó estét mindenkinek, köszöntök mindenkit itt a Közös Városunk konferencián. I'll switch to English because some of our guests didn't pick up their translation machine, so I hope it's okay for everyone. My name is Levente Poljak, and in the last years I've been working a lot across Europe with municipalities, where I realized that there's a lot of progressive policies that are being designed, being implemented, being created in these cities, not only in Western Europe, but in Southern Europe, in Central Europe, in Eastern Europe as well. So we thought that this would be a very interesting occasion to create a confrontation between these cities and our public here in Budapest. So as actually Samu and Moni, they told actually the most interesting parts, the most interesting arguments of why we created this event. I would like to focus more on this coming panel, where we realized that one of the main policy fields, or some of the main policy fields in which citizen movements actually created strong pressure and entered urban politics is housing, is the access to community spaces, is the access to community services, is gentrification, tourism, so all these issues that are actually we're also facing here in Budapest. So I really hope that many of the ideas, many of the techniques, the instruments that they will share with us will be very useful for us. We asked our panelists to speak on the one hand about their trajectory from citizen movements into city halls. How did they form a movement? How did they become a political power? How did they enter a city hall? And also, what were the policies, what were exactly those progressive policies that they brought with themselves into the city hall? How could they implement those policies in the city hall, you know, surrounded by very often heavy conservative administrative machines? What were the barriers and what were the challenges in this whole process? So I'm really thankful for many of you, well, all of you, for joining us. I would like to invite Florian Schmidt from Berlin. He's city councillor of Berlin's Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg district, and also responsible for construction and building regulations. He's also coming from a movement to change the whole real estate politics and real estate policy of Berlin. So he's been working on this for years. I think you will tell us a lot about this. And this is the policy that he also brings with him into the city hall. I would like to invite also David Bravo, who's an advisor to the mayor of Barcelona, Ada Colau, we heard in the introduction, on the topics of gentrification. So we will be very curious how the city hall institutionally can work on this topic, and what is also maybe your role in the movement and in the city hall as well. Rui Franco, a friend that we've been working together for years. I'm really happy to have you here for the first time in Budapest, which is well, I'm a bit surprised that many of you haven't been here, but it's a great occasion to be here. And Rui is a city councillor as well, responsible for urban planning and housing issues, and very involved in social economy and all kinds of innovative programs for housing in Lisbon as well. And we have Laura Collini, that we thought it would be very interesting to have a broader perspective, a European perspective of all these movements, and also a bit of an insight into the European institutional background. You know, we are not only before municipal elections, but we're also before the European elections. So our question here is also, how do we connect local politics with European politics? What can we ask from the European Union, from European politics, to help our cities to be more progressive, more inclusive, more equitable, and more just? So thank you very much for being with us. I'll also sit down, so I think it's a bit more even. And I will ask David first to share with us his experience in Barcelona Comú, and wait for me until I launch the slides, please.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Levente. Thank you very much for for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here in Budapest to share with you this this Common City Congress. And I would like to share with you how we are addressing the gentrification issue from Barcelona, first as activists, and then inside the city council. I joined Barcelona en Comú movement, citizen movement, since the very beginning, with many other friends, which were fighting from the neighborhood scale against touristification and gentrification, for the right to housing and the right to the city movements, that decided to create this platform in order to gain the government of the city, a city which was, we could say, which was somehow lost in many fronts, like the tourism front. The city council was working for tourists and for tourism and not for neighbors, or also like other fronts like real estate market, or other fronts like, for example, mobility. No, we have a huge problem with cars in Barcelona. So after we came into the government, you will see tomorrow the documentary about the process. The mayor asked me to implement a strategy to tackle with gentrification, which is a cross-section strategy that has to work with different departments, like the housing department, the urban planning department, even the commerce department, or the international relationships department. We have been implementing this strategy, which I would like to share with you tomorrow in the workshop. And we have been trying to use all the available powers that we have currently in the municipality in order to regulate the real estate market or the tourism apartments, for example. And also we have been investing lots of money in order to increase our affordable housing stock, which is really small compared with other European cities. But what I would like to talk about now is another front we have been implementing inside this anti-gentrification strategy, which is the international front, which consists in gathering with other cities in order to conquer more powers and more resources for the cities in order to tackle with this phenomena like tourism or real estate investment trust or global funds, and which cause gentrification in our local scale. So we are facing global phenomena which end up by showing up in our local scale, no? And that is why cities have to have this municipalist attitude to gather with others and to claim for these resources and powers. That is why after being in Quito in the Habitat 3 meeting, we decided to develop a kind of shared declaration with other cities, which we have presented with Mayor Colau in July in the UN headquarters in New York, which was called Cities for Housing. It was a declaration which was admitted by many relevant cities from all over the world in front of the member states of UN, and which I would like to explain you. It has just 5 points, 5 different things we are claiming for. But now, after this presentation in New York in July, what we are trying to do is to implement those 5 points, we will see them now, in the European scope. As Levente was saying, we will have these European elections on May, and it is very important that cities with a Europeistic approach, believing in Europe, we have to change European institutions in order to make policies that help cities against negative externalities of globalization. States are not currently helping always in doing so, and even many times they are provoking the problems we suffer. That is why cities have to gather in order to change Europe. So this is the declaration we are working on, which is a municipalist declaration for the right to housing and the right to the city understood together. It is very important that we address both at the same time. It is a declaration that is currently, at the beginning in New York, we were under the umbrella of UCLG, this network of cities, and now we are also under the umbrella of another network, a European one, which is Eurocities network. And we are still gathering more signatures from cities, but we already have many relevant ones, as I was saying, like Berlin or Lisbon, which are here together with us. And we also are gathering the signatures from different platforms which are fighting for the right to housing and the right to the city, and also from relevant figures like, for example, Saskia Sassen or Leilani Hara, who is the special rapporteur from the UN on housing. So the 5 statements of the declaration are the following, and I will show you some, in each one of them, I will show you some examples of how we could implement them in the European reality, okay, which are still work in progress, which are not still finished, okay. We have to work with other cities in order to determine which will be the final articles we are claiming for. But the main 5 chapters are already approved and will be the structure of the declaration. The first main point is that we need more powers in order to better regulate the real estate market. We need powers in order to defend rent, the rental housing way of accessing housing, because we have a huge bubble of rent prices in our cities, and we must find a way to defend people who is being evicted from their houses. No? We also have to fight the proliferation, the multiplication of vacant housing or the non-residential use of houses as, for example, tourist apartments. So we have to gather cities in order to negotiate together with platforms like Airbnb and not dealing with them separately. We also need to make mandatory inclusionary housing in private developments. As we invest many public money in refurbishing public spaces and public facilities, landowners are getting huge benefits. That is why we have to ask them, among every private development, to have a part of affordable housing, private-owned houses, but with limit price in order to make neighbors keep living in their neighborhoods. In Barcelona, for example, we have just approved that 30% of every private development in every part of the city has to be affordable housing. We have, as I was saying, we have to fight the proliferation of vacant housing. Many global funds are buying buildings in Barcelona and they keep them empty because it's just an investment, and we have to make it mandatory to put those houses on the market because we need them. And we also have to fight non-residential use of houses as tourist apartments, as I was saying. We have also to fight substandard housing. We have many people living in very bad conditions, and it cannot be legal to rent houses which are in a bad shape. and we have to fight energy poverty as well. And as I was saying, member states are not always helping, and they even sometimes provoke trouble, like, for example, by giving golden visa to those who want the European citizenship and who invest more than 500,000 euros in buying a house. This is creating a luxury housing bubble in Barcelona. Half of the golden visa given in Spain have been given in Barcelona, and that creates gentrification in our neighborhoods. While we are not giving a solution for refugees, we are selling European citizenship to global speculators, and this cannot be accepted. So the second main reclamation, the first one was powers to regulate private. Now we need funds to increase public housing stocks, for example, in our cities. In Europe, cities have an average of 15% of public housing or affordable housing. In Barcelona, we have just 1.5%. So we need a lot of money in order to increase our public housing stocks. But we have just the 15% of public expenditure. The central state and the regional state have much more money than we have. So we claim for this money in order to be able to increase our public investments, which have to be very well balanced in our territories. We don't have to commit again the mistakes of building public housing only in the outskirts, but we need public housing also in the central neighborhoods. So we demand to the European Union to finance, as they finance, for example, motorways or big infrastructure, we also need to understand public housing stock as an infrastructure which is really needed in our cities.
David, I'm sorry, I will have to ask you to speed up a bit,
okay,
so that we have
perfect.
time to discuss.
Okay, I will just come across the main points. The third main point, after private and public, is the mix of both with a social aim in order to create mixed solutions. The municipalities, we don't have enough powers and money to reach the affordable housing stocks we need, and that is why we have to count on others, like housing associations, social housing associations, or investors that are willing to limit their benefit in order to create affordable housing stocks. Or, for example, community land trust, which is a model that we can talk about tomorrow. And the fourth point has to do with urban planning, which is very important. We have to address housing policies as a means to improve our cities. By means of public housing, we can reach more compact and mixed neighborhoods, which are more sustainable and more fair. This is why when we address housing solutions, we have to think not only in the building or in the apartment, but also in the neighborhood and in the kind of city we are creating. And the last point is the idea of sharing, of gathering among cities, sharing knowledge, and trying to overcome the 4-year terms of government and having large-scale goals, and sharing units and methods to monitoring what is happening in real estate market with the same measures all the cities, and also sharing these goals in order to reach, for example, in 2030, a certain amount of affordable housing percent in our cities. And it consists also in having a metropolitan scope in which different municipalities are not competing among them, but they are working together in order to reach these housing stocks. And I will leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we can really go into details later on. It's great to have an overview of what are the cornerstones of progressive real estate policy and housing policy, and how could this be expanded to Europe. And before moving on to Lisbon, I would just ask you, why do you think the city of Barcelona took up this role to actually promote internationally the municipalist logic of running cities? Why did it take this, lighthouse role in Europe and in the world?
Well, honestly, this is nothing new coming from Barcelona. Many cities are working together in Europe in issues like housing, but it's quite new for Barcelona because we have been for many years a very open city, an international city, but we have been working in issues like smart city or collaborating in other networks which were not addressing the right to housing or the right to the city issue. And this is kind of a shift. We want to network with other cities in these fronts because it's the main problems that we are suffering now.
Thank you very much. And while everybody speaks about Barcelona, not very far from Barcelona, a little revolution took place, actually even a bit earlier, no? So in Lisbon we saw that this is already the second term of a municipality which has a large component coming from citizen movements. Rui, would you tell us a little bit your trajectory into this movement and how you ended up in the City Hall, and what were the policies that you brought into the City Hall?
Hello, good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for the invitation to be here. I will approach it differently than my colleague. What's happening in Barcelona is very close to what's been happening in Lisbon, and so I'll focus on what you asked. To start with, differently from Budapest or other parts of Europe, Portugal suffered a right-wing conservative dictatorship for half a century, which we got free of on our democratic revolution in 1974. Since then, historically, all left progressive parties have typically been apart and very dispersed, and that has, as often does, led for conservative policies and parties to run the majority of the time the different forms of government. Before 2007, in Lisbon and around Lisbon, there was, as in Barcelona, a lot of issues around housing quality, housing standards, illegal settlements, and so on. And myself, after a path of activism at university, at local and national level, and while I was doing some research, I joined this platform that was then created, named after the Portuguese constitutional article of the right for housing. We created this platform of mainly resident unions coming from illegal settlements and other harsh environments to claim and to intervene on the right for housing. Lisbon, just to give some background, is a capital city of almost 3 million people around Lisbon. The city itself, the municipality of Lisbon, is just at the very center of this metropolitan area, which doesn't have a real metropolitan authority. But so the city has just slightly over 500,000 inhabitants, and losing inhabitants for the last 40 years. So it had almost 1 million, and then it went down almost to 500,000 that it has now, including, I think it's relevant to give this context, that after the wars, the civil wars in the former Portuguese colonies, Lisbon alone welcomed 2 million refugees from those wars, and they are Lisboners as ourselves nowadays. And Lisbon is this strength. The diversity of Lisbon includes this 2 million former refugees mainly from Africa. Lisbon was then, in 2007, divided into 53 districts, and nowadays has, just to give a comparison, more than 20 million tourists a year visiting the city, which is about half a million. The electoral system in Lisbon is that you vote 3 times. You vote for your local, let's call it district council. You vote for the executive body, which we call it the city council of the city, and you also vote for the city assembly. This is relevant to explain what happened in 2007, which under a very liberal or neoliberal majority in the city council, with a lot of financial problems, to say the least, the city council collapsed. And there was a call for a special election, a midterm election just for the city council, with no influence from the district elections or the assembly election. And so this platform of ours that I was telling you about, so this platform called Article 64, which is the article of the Constitution, we decided that no real party was addressing the main issues of the city and of the citizens, and we decided for the first time, and we had some experience on innovating on creating the first ever citizen law initiative in Portugal and so on, and so we decided for the first time to apply for those elections as a citizen movement, which by law was and is possible. Of course, it's not in equal standards as parties, so we needed to collect in a very, very short period of time a huge amount of documents and signatures from citizens saying that they want us to submit. We were the only ones on being able to do it just under that very short time that they allowed us, but we claimed in court that the deadline shouldn't be so short because it was making citizen movements not being able in equal standards to apply. This is funny because we won that war in court, although we gathered all the signatures we needed before this crazy time frame. But the difference was that it allowed other kind of parties or parties to create kind of fake movements because they were afraid, because the polls were saying that we alone, as something that was created from in a couple of weeks, we were already having polls of more than 30% of the voting prediction. So even so, another civic movements which were not so real were able to join in, including the former mayor which was responsible for those problems and had, well, whatever. The story, you might recognize it from your own experience. Still, we run to the elections and we got more than 10% of the votes, meaning that any majority to be created depended on us. By the very first time, the left-wing parties would be able to create a majority if we would sign in. And we said, we gave a confidence and supply agreement, so we didn't accept then, at 2007, any portfolio, and we negotiated, but we were available to negotiate and to make it possible for the majority, for the left-wing majority to take office, but always depending on negotiating every step with our movement. And that's how we run from 2007 to 2010, so this half-term, special term, with no portfolio, as I said, but we've agreed, or we claimed and we negotiated that we would want enough power to develop a bottom-up research on what we call the local housing strategy, rough translation into English. So we spent 2 years involving the whole city, studying and deciding what would be the proper strategy around housing, with the initial understanding that housing, it is necessarily a cross-sectorial policy. You cannot discuss housing without discussing education infrastructures, without public transports, without health, without everything which is involved in the economy of the citizens, which then is or not able to live in the city where he wants and works and studies. And in 2009, so the normal elections came, and still with the real danger of conservative forces to have majority, we challenged for the very first time all left-wing parties to run together. Enough accepted, and we again got elected now as a coalition of two civic movements and then two left-wing parties, and again we consolidated a majority against a populist alternative that was running with a very good perspective, but they lost. And ever since, so 2009 to 2013, then 2017, we always increased the majority as a broad progressive coalition. To the point that this experience of Lisbon and the proof on how successful at all levels, social but also economical and financial, that we were able to pay all the debt, monstrous debt that the city had, but still doing it in a way to improve life standards and wages and social infrastructure and so on, that this progressive alliance, I don't like the word, but well, you understand what I'm talking about, was then in the middle of last political term, so 2013-2017, upscale to the national level, and again, for the very first time, a left-wing government was created based on the support of a parliament, a very divided parliament, but where it would be needed, and for the very first time it happened. So the previous mayor of Lisbon, Antonio Costa, which was a part of this new open perspective on accepting a wide left-wing coalition where everything needed to be negotiated, this was upscaled to the national level. And the present Portuguese government and parliament has as prime minister the former mayor of Lisbon, and so the experience of Lisbon was upscaled, including the citizen movements, which we have some members of the national parliament, and then the ones responsible for housing again, creating the majority, which has been proving the same success. In 4 minutes left, I want to now to tell the story in a different perspective. I would like, or I hope, to inspire a speech of hope to the room, to say that all the success of what I'm about to explain, it took time, it took all these 11 years to reach where we are now, but I hope it proves that the genetics, the DNA of the movement was not lost, and we did not convert to traditional politics. We have accepted and negotiated municipal roles like portfolios, like formal housing portfolio, local development, social rights, even the finance portfolio is ours, and this has been growing the level of influence of our movement in the majority, to the point that nowadays we hold the presidency of the city assembly and the vice presidency of the city council. Because above all, that's my perspective at least, because we always played the role of bridging all the progressive forces together in not focusing on what divides us, but focusing on being able to implement what we agree upon. Examples on this, well, just to give a couple of words, so still got 2.5 minutes. Policies and city management cannot be done in the traditional silos approach, so cross-sectorial policy making, transparency, participation, decentralization, and this 3 times decentralization. We claim and we gather a huge amount of competence from the national state to the municipal state, to the municipality, and then from the municipality to the district level, and from the municipal sphere, municipality and districts included, to the civil society itself. Just to give a number, just for you to understand, districts have tripled their budget in the last couple of years. So this is the level of decentralization, like schools, culture, sports, green areas, whatever, they are all already managed by at the district level. The city has claimed and succeeded against all previous conservative governments, and we were able to hold it in court until we got the new government, to buy back all the public transports, which is now owned by the city. And just to give you a couple of examples. But then the third level is about the community empowerment. I'll be back to the community empowerment, which I'll be mainly speaking about tomorrow on tomorrow's workshop. But on the housing right priority, just to give a couple of numbers, we've reorganized the whole city priorities in a way that we used to own 20% of the housing stock. The social housing system in Portugal and in Lisbon is that it is income-based. That's the main difference. So people are selected to as more as they are deprived, and the rent is calculated directly. So it's a kind of a percentage of the family income. So it's a dynamic social rent, which is way, way less than the real cost of the housing. Just to have an idea, the deficit between the maintenance cost and the social rent just for the present stock is more than 100 million a year that is directly supported by the city. But we are now building for a couple of years, and we aim to build it for the next 5 or 7 years, at least to double the amount of houses of municipally owned housing stock in Lisbon, from 20% of the city to 40% of the city. On community empowerment, and back to all that network of local organizations to be empowered that were the DNA of our movement. From 2009, when we took real office with Portfolio, one of the first things that we did, and is nowadays recognized as an example, is this BIP-ZIP strategy, which is basically we mapped within the Lisbon Master Plan what we call the priority intervention areas, territories of the city. And the story basically has 4 steps. So the mapping, second, a capacity building, empowering mechanism to bring and to empower local organizations in this priority intervention areas, which is called as the BIP-ZIP program, which basically funds projects by partnerships of local organizations tackling the deficits of that specific, like if it is unemployment or lack of education or this or that tackle those. But basically, we multiply by 10 the power and the capacity and the know-how of the local organizations. Third, we created what we call like these local co-governance structures, where local development plans are not done by the city or the district alone, but by a local cooperation of this civil society, designing, planning, and implementing local development projects, plans with real public budget, not well owned but not managed by the city. And last but not least is under this European program called Community-Led Local Development, is that we then promoted the creation of a kind of a federation of all these NGOs, which now under this European program are themselves responsible for defining the rules and the implementation of all the European funding to deprived neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rui. Before we move on, and thank you very much for elaborating on how you started from housing and then you went into actually neighborhoods, deprived neighborhoods. Tomorrow you will speak about social economy. If you have to say maybe 2 or 3 other themes that made you win the elections, what would be these themes that you think brought people on board from Lisbon?
Well, is that we are not aliens, is that we are them. We are the ones needing to solve the problem. That's as simple. We became the city.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Berlin, where we all know Berlin. Berlin is much closer to Budapest. I think there's a very strong organic links between Berlin and Budapest. Most of the people who left, young people who left Budapest in the last years, they ended up in Berlin. And we all know that in the early 90s, Berlin was an experimental ground for a lot of social initiatives, a lot of cultural initiatives. But then, of course, real estate pressure came to Berlin as well, where it was almost unimaginable before. And suddenly there was a lot of movement, a lot of discussion about what should be done how should we control the real estate market. And I remember being, maybe it's 2011 or maybe a few years later, being in Berlin, and I was taken to a discussion, a round table somewhere in south of Mitte, a discussion on like a roundtable discussion on what should be the future future real estate policy in Berlin. And for me, it was a very interesting moment of a milieu gaining consciousness and starting to elaborate from bottom up a policy that later on was actually picked up by the city. And Florian was at the core of this whole discussion. Would you mind telling us a little bit how your trajectory from starting to discuss about real estate policies, arriving to the city hall, how did you go through this process?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm very glad to be here in this interesting situation in Budapest. So, yes, everything started with the situation that in Berlin, as you said, after the more or less 10 years that everybody could do what he likes in some vacant spaces where it was cheap to live or to use spaces to do anything you want, then it became more difficult and we became a kind of housing crisis. So in the housing crisis, what did the city do? Instead of realizing there is a housing crisis, some years they said there is no one, and they go on, they continue with a politics that was selling public space, public building areas to the market. That meant that there we had commercial city structures, if for living or for commercial stuff. And out of the idea that Berlin is a place where you could create something different, something non-commercial and creative, a lot of people were angry, and me too. And we founded, we created a kind of council of all the projects and all the people who were engaged in these, let's say, liberal leftist projects. And we founded a round table with politics of the opposition, but also of the government, with parliamentarians. And we reached something which is quite innovative, I think. We reached that there was a round table inside the parliament building, founded with parliamentarians who were interested in the issue, mostly on urbanism, and the same parties people interested on financial issues. They would not join this round table. They did not support us, but there was a coalition of parliamentarians and civil society who created a round table inside the parliament, which is kind of hacking the parliament. And this has now the 28th round table in March, I think, so it's a long trajectory since 2011, and it became like a kind of civic political platform for the issue of real estate politics. And then it growed, everyone joined, also economy, people from the economy and from green issues and culture, so housing, of course. And we accompanied the renewal of the politics of the city. And when election came, there was a lot of pressure coming from this platform. And when, for example, in the year 2 years before, 2016, when there was election, and there was the first time in the Berlin history a leftist a three-party government of leftist parties, so it's a red-green government, we call it. Then, for example, this platform was lobbying a lot and writes literally the contract between these parties on the issues of real estate politics and some model projects, like big urbanization projects. So it became influential. And my role as a spokesman of the initiative, which was called Rethink the City, the initiative who initiated the roundtable, as a spokesman of this initiative and a kind of coordinator of the round table was, of course, to coordinate a lot of things and to be present in the public. So I was a kind of public person. And then 2 years before the elections, the Artists Association of Berlin asked me to make a job, because sometimes you need jobs. A job which is called the Commissioner for Artist Studios. So this job was to coordinate the program of the Senate of the City of Berlin to give artists studios where they can work. And this experience for me was really important, because then reduced on one issue, on this issue, which is a small thing in the city, but it was like concerning the whole city, the whole area, and a lot of people. And it was a kind of core issue in the identity of Berlin, because artists is something that is important for Berlin. It makes it also attractive for a lot of people. So this job made me kind of give me the possibility to have a position where you mix activism and being part of the administration, but outside the administration, because I was paid from the city, but I was independent. So this is a very important experience for me. And when the election came or after the election in 2016, the Green Party asked me to make a job, and this is my actual job, is Councillor for Urbanism of the district Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg, which is one of 12 districts with more or less 300,000 citizens, like the 24th city of Germany, if you want. And there's a lot of competences in the district. The districts in Berlin, they spend 2 of 3 parts of the city budget. And in urbanism, they have the whole, let's say, they take all the decisions. And of course, I agreed, because this was a great opportunity to go further. And then, it began to work, and I was one of 2 activists in charge in political positions. Another one was André Holm, maybe one heard of him. He was sent from another party to be a state secretary in urbanism department of the city of Berlin, and after 2 months he had to go out of government, because the opposition made a big campaign against him, because when he was 19 he was in the Stasi, which is a secret service of the GDR. It was from my point of view, a campaign against him. The young person, he did some bad stuff. So I'm left. I'm the only one now. But it is a very, very good experience for everybody, I think, because having the power, it is like this, because you have a lot of power if you're a councillor. I mean, in my position, it is like this. You really see how things work, and you can also do things really different. And I just want to mention two topics. One is, which started a bit earlier, but I had it in my hand then, the instruments. It's the right to buy in that has the district. If housing, real estate is sold, then you can buy in as a city. That means that the buyer doesn't get the building, but the city gets it. To protect tenants and the neighborhoods of gentrification, to keep it easy. And this instrument was, in my district, initialized some year before, but then I could really exercise it in an intense way. And from my experience as an activist who had to do with real estate, it was easy to make it in a radical way. So we started to do it, and now after 2 years let's say we communalized more than 1% of the stock of housing of the district stock. That's like 2,000 flats. And if you could go on year to year, it could be more. It could be like rising the communal stock, which I say always communal with C, and it makes only sense in German because communal with K is like state property, and communal with C is like common. It's a common. It could also be cooperatives, foundations. It's non-commercial. So the non-commercial stock now is like 25%, and we raise it to 26%, and we want to 50%, for example. So this is one example. And now in Berlin we have a kind of revolutionary mood, and expropriation, let's say, is an idea, but this buy-in is really a practice that is quite common. There's a lot of money in the government right now because economy is okay, it's very good. And the government of Berlin spends a lot of money together with the districts to practice this communalization of housing, also of business areas. And the other one is how to build. This is where I come from. And as I started when I started the governing in 2017, then a lot of initiatives from the district, I knew them and I was part of them in a way, come to me and said, hey, how can we go on to collaborate? And then we created new structures. We made a study, but then we created new structures to collaborate in housing, building, but also in how to protect existing housing units. And we created strategies that were kind of activist strategies, but also much more participative procedures when it comes to build a complex of houses and a new neighborhood, for example. So it's now, after 2 years, we now created the structures and now we will begin. It takes time. It's not so easy. But I think it's really interesting that if you want, you can really change administration. This is what my lesson learned. There is money. You have to have money in the city. If there's no money, you can do it differently, of course. But what is difficult if activists work precariously, and it is important that activists become professional and they keep being independent. But if you create structures with them, then there could be another way of making city and protecting city. I could go in details. We will do this tomorrow. But only one thing at the end. For example, we now will found a new foundation, a neighborhood, I would say ground foundation. It keeps the ground because ground speculation is a big problem. And we now from the district found a foundation that buys buildings and grounds to keep it out of speculation, and that works with public money, with private money. So you really, sometimes you can invent new instruments with civic society, but to be honest, this is possible because this district is a kind of, is the most leftist district since ever. And it's a kind of laboratory to the city. It has been before. And I will finish with something, looking to Portugal. Maybe it's important for you. This laboratory, the district, Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg, has the same government combination than the city. This is a red-green leftist government. And it is full of activists who not always agree with the government, but who push the government forward to different and new strategies. And they want to be independent. So from my point of view, as we have also in Germany elections in 2 years, and this red-green government is the only solution on a federal level to really change the country. So if this works good right now in Berlin and in this district, it has a model function to the whole country. And the discourse now is really heavy because the kind of revolutionary mood, talking about property, real estate property, is really frightening a lot of people from the conservative and the capitalist wing. And they try to blame us to make communism come back, which is absolutely bullshit. I mean, just to keep it clear there. And it's more like communism with C, like make it common, keep things out of the speculation and out of really. Well, I have 50 minutes now, over. So I had a timer here.
Perfect timing.
So just wanted to finish with this, that sometimes what happens in a district could be important for the nation and maybe for Europe, I don't know. But we should also connect districts, or we should connect the most local things, and we keep going on with this.
Thank you, Florian. I would encourage everyone to start preparing your questions. We have some time for questions, and especially tomorrow we'll have a lot of time to go into the details. But before we move back to the European scale, I would like to ask Florian one more question about, you talked a lot about housing, but you also worked on non-housing, like cultural spaces, social spaces, workspaces. What was your approach? What was your work on that?
Of course, right now we focus a lot on housing, but in the district, for example, we also struggle a lot with the market of business real estate, because there's none regulation on this. On housing, we have regulations. We can work with these, what I told you before, the buy-in procedures, which is only for housing. So this is really complicated, and it's direct fighting sometimes with investors. But also there, the city of Berlin created a budget to buy real estate. And sometimes what we are doing, we're doing it in some examples and it's quite tricky, and I can tell you this here in Budapest more open than I could tell you in Berlin, because we really work on the limit sometimes of legal procedures. So if we want to prevent, for example, someone kicking out all the tenants of a business place because he wants to put in, let's say, digital economy instead of creative economy and artists and neighborhood-oriented business. So then we're trying to really make him life difficult with different juridical movements. And then we try to force him to sell it to a low price, because if he don't, he will not do anything with it. So there you have to really practice tactics that are complicated, but as I learned that if you have all the instruments and you have an administration that is with you, and this is also work you have to do. I know what Barcelona did and how they try to get to the workers of the administration. It was really interesting when they come to the power. So if you have an administration that works with you in all the levels, then you can do really a lot. And this is also an experience. And conservative administration and politicians always say, oh, it's not possible. There's a lot of laws here, and if you do this, then it's very expensive. So you have to question all that.
Thank you very much. And before I give over to the audience for questions, I would like to turn to Laura. Laura, who has been working as an advisor and consultant and expert for the European Commission and different programs. She's also herself a housing activist and a researcher. And I think you have a very good overview of how these movements are actually connected and can be connected in the European level. And my question is a little bit to look into how the European institutional structures allows us to be progressive. What can Europe give us, give cities, give districts to implement progressive policies? And what are the limits that the European institutional structure actually puts on us?
First of all, I would like to change the way you ask the question, in the sense like what can...
Feel free to...
How can Europe, what can Europe give to us? But to say, how do we reclaim what Europe can give to us? I would like to a little bit shade some light in the situation. I think for what they said, it's very clear that housing is the centrality of the debate of, generally speaking, of the right to housing, of the right to cities, sorry. Rui was saying you cannot talk about housing and not dealing with education, neighborhood, district, and so on and so forth, and economy as well. But if we go to the level of the European level, to the level of Europe, and we think how housing is treated, then you may get disappointed, because as being this machinery, housing, Europe being a machinery, housing is not considered to be within the mandate. Not even cities are in the mandate of the European Commission. According to the treaty, the number 10, social policies are not in the package of the competencies of the European Union, but they can give advices and they can give funding. And we know that at the end, Europe is influencing how cities are developing. So, so then you may get stuck in the matter of competencies and saying, okay, that's not a discussion that we can have. But then you have to say you have to look at how this mechanism works. And again, you may be disappointed, because if we say that housing is an entry point for an integrated approach to cities, then you may see, like, how does it work in terms of funding? Who gives money to that? Well, you see that there are different kind of departments that are called Directorate General. Each of them are dealing with a part of this funding. You have the funding for regional and urban development, you have a social funding, social funds, you have a migration fund, and all of them have to do with cities and how cities are designed and developed. But the way they're structured is very, very sectorial. Now, can we stop here? No. So how do we reclaim? I come back to that point. So we have to see what are the cracks in the mechanism, what are the possibilities, the opportunities given in this mechanism. So if, for instance, if we look at the ERDF fund, the Regional Development Fund, there are some tools like the one you were mentioning before, the CLLD, the Community-Led Local Development, or others. I don't want to become too technical, but there are others like Integrated Territorial Investment. There are opportunities like the Urban Innovative Action, given funding for the first time directly to cities where there is a certain level of innovation. And then there is some kind of movement or trying to change this pachydermic or elephantic, if I may use this word in English, mechanism of the European Commission. And for 20 years since the end of the 90s, there has been discussion about the urban agenda within the European Commission. And for the first time in 2016, has been creating a series of partnerships where you have the participation of cities, member states, and international organizations around topics related to cities, one of which is housing, and some of the cities that were here have been participating, migration, air quality, and so on and so forth. So here there is potentially a platform for reclaiming certain of the debates that we are having, certain points that we are making here. For instance, in the housing partnerships, there have been the idea of creating housing focal points or claiming for better funding for affordable housing, involving the European Investment Bank and so on. So there are little kind of movements in which we are trying, or cities as well are trying to crack into the system. So that's, I think, one level. And the other level, it's very important what David was saying, that the coordination between different types of organization. You were mentioning Housing Europe, the UCLLG. So it's a sort of a meso level that it's not directly connected to the European institutions, but they are important because they can lobby and they can also claim for having funding directly to cities. I just make a very simple example. For the migration debate, cities have been on the forefront of integration policies, but they don't have access directly to money, to funding. Years of campaign since the crisis of 2015 have now changed that the AMI fund, which is the direct fund for migration, they have thematic facilities in which 5% of the funding will be directly given to cities. It was not possible before, was not even thinkable before. So might be, possibly, in terms of housing. And then I would say, so the one level is looking at the lobbying, using the instruments that are already existing, trying to crack the system. it's important also to have a battle on the legal and juridical mechanism, really become aware that what are the instruments that we can use in that sense, how can we work on changing what is already existing. And then again, I think it's very important what we are trying to do here, trying to connect cities at the cities level among them in the municipalist mechanism. And this can make pressure in reclaiming certain power at European level, also through the election of the 23rd of May. So that's pretty much it.
So this means that in May we will have to vote in a way that to support a vision that might give more autonomy to cities, because we see that most progressive ideas come from cities actually. So we have to help this movement. I would give over. We have time for 2 or 3 questions at max. And I know that usually it's very slow in Hungary. So of course I have the first question, waiting for our guests to make up their minds. I would like to ask you a little bit about the symbolics, the political dimension. You know, we talk about housing, we talk about 30% of private housing should be made affordable. We talk about community-owned land. We talk about a lot of technical issues, but how do you translate this to a city of 3 million people or 1 million people? And I remember Antonio Costa moving his office down into a very problematic neighborhood on a square, which was, full of prostitution, drug dealing, and it was a very symbolic statement that we care about the poorest parts of the city. We are here, we see what's happening, we give our priority to these neighborhoods. But what are the political messages that can help you translate all these progressive policies into, in the end, a one-sentence slogan? No? Can you give us some hints? What makes your, public policies attractive also on the level of politics?
Well, on very concrete terms, if we speak about housing, we could, myself and Laura and probably the rest, could spend like a whole week just using technical jargon and nobody would understand what we would be talking about. But it is as simple as the right to housing, the right for the city, means that a local salary needs to afford in not more than, let's say, a quarter, 25%, the cost of the house. So if I earn 400 euros, the city is, the society, the economy is not responding my needs if it doesn't provide a house within 25% of that. And this is clear. And that's what, even at the European level, we are changing the writing and the communication to make it as simple and undebatable as this. So then we can discuss if it's 25%, 30 or 20. We can discuss that. But these people understand. I do not have in Lisbon, with my salary, a house which I can rent. And this is what we all understand very clearly.
For me, we have one of the main challenges we have is a cultural battle that aims to make a shift in the mindset of people, even in the mindset of people which are deeply suffering of housing problems, but which think that housing is an individual issue. It is an individual problem that you have to solve in the private market. Even today, many people reject public housing buildings in front of their house. They prefer a public park. So this shift must be done in order to make people claim for these public policies, and not just public, also community-driven, mixed policies. But if we don't have people claiming for housing, for common community-driven housing solutions, we will never achieve this goal.
Yeah, I mean, to add something more, because this I'm totally agree with this. In my practice, I have two issues. One is to create strategies where really people can participate to create like housing or to create strategies to protect existing structures. And I'm really I'm admiring LAPA and the movement in Barcelona who try to prevent evictions, because they really worked with people. They don't only make politics like I'm the activist and I know how world is going, how everything we have to do and to change, but they really worked with the affected people. And this is the important thing. If the city creates mechanisms with activists and with the affected people that they can collaborate, then people see they take part of what we have to do. And another thing is really personal, that I became a bit famous in Germany, and I was in TV shows and all that stuff. And I sometimes think that this is also important, that you have some people who put the face in the media and really say, stop, until here and then stop. So I get mails and telephone calls that people really are impressed personally. I'm just taking a role, but like, oh, this is different. So sometimes we need this, that persons stand there and say, we can do it different. And I think in Germany it's new. What is happening there is that you're institutionalizing this with movements who are governing. But if you start, you need persons who make the first step.
Thank you. Az utolsó lehetőség kérdések feltevésére. Biztos vagyok benne, hogy nagyon sok benne maradt ebben a beszélgetésben, ami kijöhetett volna. Van egy... Magyarul is lehet kérdezni természetesen, és van egy mobil mikrofonunk, ami körbe megy a teremben. Nekem persze van még egy csomó kérdés, amivel ki tudom ezt tölteni, de hogy szerintem nagyon izgalmas lenne, hogyha azok a dolgok, amik bennmaradtak, amikről nem beszéltünk, pedig kellett volna, azokat át tudnánk beszélni még. Addig is, in the same time, we're waiting for the brave, the most courageous people to raise their hands. I have another question. There's a question there.
Somebody has to start eventually. So the fact that you guys basically got into politics from outside means that these issues are impossible to be addressed by mainstream old-fashioned leftist politics before. So there was actually no chance to make it right by professional discussions, by some politicians taking it over to their trajectories. I'm just curious if basically, because many countries are facing this problem right now, and of course you are a bit ahead. But is it always impossible to make this within a professional framework, and it's necessary to actually engage in politics, or could be elsewhere as well?
Well, my feeling on this is that, of course, what we call traditional politics could or should address people's needs. That's what they're there for. What I felt happening in Portugal is that parties become closer, closed in themselves for too long, and they began to lose track on what people were really needing and claiming for. It doesn't need to be this way. It should never be that way. But people's need is the mainstream by definition. So it's not the people which are wrong, it's that the parties lost track of their role. And it's nothing against the relevance of party organization within democratic societies. But I honestly do believe that democracy improves if we have the most easy, direct participation of citizens in politics, because it is not only about what we can do directly, it is also, if not mainly, how much we made the traditional parties to need to adapt and to change and to update, and that is irreversible.
Yes, I would say that I would be very careful when we create this distance between traditional left parties and new citizen movements, because this can make us stop being aware of the danger of becoming a traditional left party. It is very easy to become so when you are in power, because lobbies and establishment are really close. You feel them here. It's really a big pressure. They have the media. They have the context to directly speak with you. And it's really a huge pressure. So I wouldn't feel safe of this menace, and I would be very aware.
Just a short answer. My vision for Berlin is there should be a platform of the initiatives, and then all the leftist party give some places of their lists to parliaments and also their positions governing to this movement. So then you could create an independent movement, but you are inside the system. So this is, I mean, possible. You have to negotiate it, and it would be a different model to the platform model in Barcelona, but yeah, could be an interesting way to create, keep the distance and the difference.
Az utolsó kérdés. The time for the last question. So I will have the last question. No, there's in the margins.
I have a question. So you seem to like your own policies a lot. How about the voters? Will you be re-elected again, do you think? And for some of you, elections are coming up very soon. For some of you, it's later. But how effective do you think you are at the level of actual elections?
Well, as I said before, we were elected in 2007, 2009, 13, 17. So we are still almost 3 years away from next election. But you said something which is fundamental for me. On whatever we dedicate our lives to, if we don't have a passion to it, it doesn't work. Second, what I believe we make a difference and we change traditional politics is that you're not my colleague, I'm not your boss, secretary general of the party or whatever. We are friends doing something together. It's about affection. And this is something that everybody when works with us understands. It's like, we work in a different way, we deal with, and this connects to people way easierly than those office or party traditional forms of practicing politics within parties. But this is changing because of that. And again, I need to insist. This is something, a refreshment that then democracy was in need of. It is not about parties not being part of the solution. Is about the refreshment and the openness and the transparency and the participation that, including the parties themselves, needed to change. And then we will keep winning. We will lose one day, I'm sure. Like, I don't have this job for life. I'm absolutely sure of that. It is not a job, it is an opportunity. And what I do every day, and all of my friends and colleagues with me, is that I am enjoying this opportunity of power to the most. Like, I will do as much change as I can while I'm there, because I know one day I'll be going away.
I have no idea about what is going to happen in Barcelona next elections. Municipal elections are in May, at the end of May. As you may know, we have currently a huge issue huge kind of legal war between Spain and Catalonia. We have a trial of politicians which have been accused, and this creates a lot of interest for many people. Even if they have housing problems, they are very concerned about this trial. So it's a very difficult situation. Anyway, I don't know what will happen in terms of politics, in terms of elections. What I know is that as an architect, I know that the city, to shape the city is a very big effort, which takes a long time. And that creates a paradox and a conflict with politics. In Barcelona, as I told you, we have 1.5% of public housing. If we want to reach 15%, we won't do that in 4 years, that's for sure. And all the urban planning policies take a long term to be improved and to be felt by citizens. So it is very difficult to improve the city in this short time and let people realize that things are changing. So this is very, very difficult for me.
Sorry, I just forgot something in 2 seconds. The most important answer to your question for me is that when you share power in this way with every citizen, when every citizen has tasted the smell of participating in power, they will never let it go easily again.
Well, just one sentence. I think, from my point of view, if you enter to government with new strategies, more civic or activist strategies, then you have to govern at least 2 times. It's not possible only 5 years or 4 years and it's over and your structures are not implemented. So my goal is to have this job 2 times, and yes, we will see if people like it.
If I may, I just want to add a comment that is not a European level, but it's mostly as a person that I'm Italian and I live in Germany and I work at European level, and I often hear of presenting your example as a stellar example. You have Lisbon, Barcelona and Berlin, but Europe is much wider than that, and it's in many different places so difficult even to think of something like this. And what we see, for instance, in my country is very desperate at the moment, the kind of situation that we have for the national government and cities, and out of a few examples, probably Milan and Naples and maybe some few others small, they really, really struggle even to imagine participation, not in the way you are exposing, because the kind of things that you are saying, Rui, has been seen in a populist argument, participation, direct participation, and so on, and then it's turned out in being very conservative at the end, racist, intolerant, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, how can we change? How can we create different types of language and dialogue that actually brings together also people that are not thinking like-minded like us, that are also working in the business sector, also trying to create some kind of bridges and trying to think that this is possible to change also from where the situation is the most difficult and more impossible, because also was a particularly historical moment that possibly something like this happened in Berlin or Barcelona and so on and so forth. So really changing also the mindset of the idea that also it can be changed also when it's more difficult, and creating liaison also beyond the stellar examples, also from other small and medium-sized cities, for instance.
Rui, would you like to react on this with the right of the last word? Or I think we thank you very much for being here and being part of it, and you'll be with us tomorrow. So holnap velünk maradnak az előadóink, ma is velünk maradnak. Most egy 20 perces szünet következik, és utána 7 órakor itt folytatjuk a következő panellal, és kérem, hogy addig is mindenki készítse elő a kérdéseit, legyen annyira interaktív, amennyire csak lehet. És egy közérdekű bejelentés.
Én csak egy másodperc türelmet kérek, még mielőtt mindenki szétszéled, hogy jól mondta Levente, 7 órát olyan a következő panelbeszélgetés, amely témáján tekintve talán kicsit más lesz, kevésbé a konkrét policy megoldásokról szól, hanem inkább egy személyes oldaláról egyrészt, hogy mit jelent egy ilyen történetbe becsatlakozni, másrészt pedig, hogy mindez, ami sikeresen működik mondjuk dél-európai, nyugat-európai környezetben, az k-európai, közép-kelet-európai környezetben hogyan működik. Úgyhogy reméljük, hogy minél többen itt maradnak természetesen a következő beszélgetésre, és ez 7 órától kezdődik. Köszönöm szépen.